Forget National Geographic, even Discovery for that matter, who was principal competition at that point of time.
There was like a Taj Mahal and then there was Kingdom of Dreams, a part of it, right?
The Kapil Sharma show, entire country is nearly watching that show. कि अब मेरे को सब कुछ पता होगा.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Digit Educators Podcast. So today I have with me my friend who has been my guide and always my bouncing pad for new ideas. So welcoming on the podcast, Udit Ragesh Goyal.
Thank you, Akshay. Thank you for the titles.
So I just introduced Udit in detail. Udit has been working on multiple brands. So his journey started with media company, which was Fox. And Udit, just fill in when you want to. And after that, moved to e-commerce, Amazon, and now he's a brand consultant who is helping shape multiple brands. I think a lot of legacy brands have been reworked by you.
So yes, I've had the fortune of working with some of the bigger brands that we hear about. I got after my post-graduation, while it was the pre-placement talked about calling it Fox International Channels. Only after joining did we realize that it included National Geographic. And so I've got that chance to work on National Geographic, the television brand, and the Fox Network Group channels, which are Fox Traveler, later rebranded to Fox Life, and the entire group of Fox International Channels in India. I also got the opportunity to work both on, let's say, the profit and the revenue side, both the cost and the revenue side for these channels for a period of good 6 years, after which I worked with Amazon, again, across different roles in brand and brand marketing. So yes, I mean, जैसे वो कहते हैं कि कई बार sometimes you choose your brands and sometimes the brands choose you. So been lucky enough to do that. Also, in my recent avatar, in my current avatar, I have been now working with more upcoming and startup brands. That's a different joy and a different challenge. So that's about me.
Let's just start with the journey. So let's talk about your days at Nat Geo and Fox Entertainment. I think they were both being the same. So
Sure.
Was it majorly Nat Geographic which you worked for, National Geographic, or was it on other channels?
So again, there is this interesting story that he was one of our seniors who had come to campus for placements, and he specifically in the pre-placement talks never mentioned National Geographic as the channel that they are recruiting for. And later on, जब पता चला उनसे बात हुई, तो what he said was he didn't want people to join this specific job just for the brand value of National Geographic. So it was called Fox International Channels. It was the infotainment and travel subgenre of TV channels in India. It worked with the Star Network at that point of time. So all of us joined. There were 3 of us who had joined from campus into Fox International Channels, not knowing that it also included National Geographic as the mothership channel. But once we joined it, we realized, this is also an opportunity working there. Just to briefly capture my time, because those were also I spent good 6.5 years at Fox International Channels and got to do pretty much a lot of stuff there, both from digital brand marketing, as an ABM, to managing the social media pages ourselves, to a BM on National Geographic across the genres. Also making the switch and also doing what we typically get the revenue role, which was branded integration, branded content, brand solutions, again for the network of channels. So yeah, that has been my journey there. The other thing that I am quite used to, and I guess all of my peers and all of our colleagues who used to be, suddenly this National Geographic comes a certain weight and that aura of wearing your khaki pants, going out into the jungle, having those long, because that's the image,
Perception. That's the perception,
the yellow
yeah.
window inspires, and we usually let it be. कि वो 80-20% वाला rule था. 80% it was the subject matter of what we used to promote and work with was the National Geographic content and that bar, the editorial bar. But eventually it was a television channel. The dynamics were more of the television channel than the National Geographic Society or the editorial one. So a typical day, if you ask me to your question, was more like how a brand marketing manager or an ABM or a BM would do in any other television broadcast channel in 2011, those times, was that which include converting the programming slate into consumer facing communication, promoting the brand in its television format for National Geographic. Again, so not very different from someone of our peers who joined, let's say, a Sony at that point of time, or even ZTV. So, I
No,
mean,
but when you say this, I think I remember this very clearly, and I was working at that time, and I remember that you did a series of like 10-part series of special things in India. Like there was like a Taj Mahal, and then there was Kingdom of Dreams, a part of it, right? Yeah. And so, how does that brand integration kind of played a part? I also remember kind of looking back at the archive and getting files from your team to kind of promote the brand. So how does that pan out, and how does the whole role of monetization of content play?
Actually, the series that you mentioned was not so much about monetization of content. It was part of our regionalization. And again, brand marketing, regionalization has been a big theme, at least in our initial years as brand marketing. I would call it the decade of 2011 till 2020, if that's one decade. At that point, especially with brands like National Geographic or international brands making a foray into India, how do you talk India slash Bharat was a big thing. And everybody wanted to talk to the audience about topics which are closer to home.
Yeah.
So the series that you mentioned specifically was part of a programming initiative rather than a marketing initiative or a monetization initiative. Where the idea was to pick up subjects which were current, live, and again, which definitely talk to the National Geographic ethos. So it was, if I remember it correctly, it was like an Inside series was used to be a bigger platform where we used to go into the workings behind the scenes of bigger organizations, bigger productions like Kingdom of Dreams used to be, and that was the programming pillar to which it kind of talked to. As a marketing person on the brand, eventually the job of marketing India specific was relatively much more easier than when we had these global concepts which we had to like repackage into for the Indian audience. So yeah, Kingdom of Dreams and all of those were part of that programming initiative, so to say.
But did that lay the journey to the content monetization piece? Because that made it more relatable. That brought it more closer to the home.
Bilkul,
Right?
yaar, what happened actually was, and I think all channels saw that success. Forget National Geographic, even Discovery for that matter, who was principal competition at that point of time. Everybody saw great success when it came to Indianizing content. And that laid the foundation. अच्छी तरह से, I have never kind of thought of it like this, like how you articulated. That laid the foundation for a lot of other things eventually. Even before my time at National Geographic, Mission series, which was the defense forces and an insight into that, was a big thematic for National Geographic. It is that exclusive access that you take. Those set the bar, or let's say set the platform for really brands taking it forward and doing Indian content. And once everyone tasted कि लोग Indian content देखने आ रहे हैं, then you could really take your channel to the advertiser and say, because people are interested in Indian content on, let's say, a global platform like a Discovery, like a National Geographic, it made the package proposition for a brand a lot more easier to sell, which led to eventual monetization, which led to branded content, doing brand forward documentary content, and also brand solutions at that point of time. It used to be a big thing.
I I talked to about this from a perspective that how the content landscape has kind of changed, right? So when I talk about this, I understand that initially a brand used to talk only in the language which it thought would have a liking to its ideology. Right? Then there is localization, as you mentioned. There is
Sure.
localization, which happened, and we're talking around 12 years back, right? 10 to 12 years back, which is actually before the whole digital wave, right? Before the whole content wave, which happened in digital.
Before the influencers
Before the
came and
influencer
took
wave.
over.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
influential wave.
Yeah. So if I have to say that with the localization of content, the next step was about syndication or the content syndication. And further on, this was leveraged by a lot of brands, not even on television. Like this is a purely media based brand, like something like a brand FMCG or purely in any retail space, right? How did they kind of moved from just being creators in their own space to localize and then become empowering to different chats as the brands have today become omnipresent, right? They cannot be limited to one form of communication. They have to be more discussional, right?
नहीं absolutely yeah, उस टाइम भी क्या होता था if I remember correctly it's not that long ago, but again at that point of time also the digitization, so to say, the digital explosion had started in terms of there was this competition of Facebook page followers, etc., and how does it even as a product to the advertiser, right? To then, to like you said, to an FMCG guy, uh, the sole offering of traditional media was being peppered by your digital offering. What is an interactive element that you are adding on to a typical mass media offering of, let's say, what a television channel used to offer?
But I think at that point it was more a vanity thing, right? It wasn't something which a person would come to an NGO thinking that okay, they have 200,000 followers. I think I might be slightly lower on numbers, but the follower base was not the main criteria. Yes, that was a good vanity to have.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, what that. So, if you said, if I have to remember and put it rightly, I would say it was the beginning of this
Yeah, it was.
follower
Yeah.
war and etc. And that's why it used to be this vanity add-on, like you say, nicely put. Vanity add-on of what a traditional media gives you, and within the channel, for example, you forget eventually, because syndication, monetization were challenges or were, but yes, I think this was an interesting decade where we were able to see where it started from those vanity metrics to really brands being pulled into or being forced to have their own point of view on everything digital. I think that has that's been a big transformation. We have lived through it. Maybe sometimes that's why you don't realize it until unless you sit down having a chat like this. From where it started in terms of so to that 1 lakh, 2 lakh. I remember there used to be a big celebration when our Facebook channel hit a 1 lakh following, and it was purely organic at that point of time. The algorithms were being worked out, etc. So it was those initial days where I think brands wanted to be seen as digital first. It was already starting off, rather than how it's currently, where there is, I think, more action, so to say, happening on digital than sometimes even traditional media.
Look, like when you said that it's just been around 10, 12 years and it's not very, very far in the horizon. But the reality at point as any brand, right? It was more about garnering those likes, followers. It was only a matrix which was being chased rather than today. Digital has become like your main play. Like that's the game you start with as a brand, right? Because it gives you a lot of testing ability. It doesn't, you don't need to create a communication for a television which is going to reach a mass audience. You can test it first on online, and I think that has become a strategy for a lot of brands to test their initial communication offering and then create versions around that.
Actually, a lot of them do it. A lot of them, at least in my personal experience, it's fancy to say to do that. To take away real learnings and to say that whether my digital pilot can impact my traditional campaign, I haven't seen much of it happening. People do that. Brands tend to do that. It's a ability that digital does afford you, but it's something that it's being afforded by a lot of other market research options or tactics also. Again, to me, digital ka सबसे strongest point might not be experimentation as such, but I think it's a little tricky to say, and I think so. Everyone who has worked enough to know is the biggest promise that digital media came in during these years and came with was they said holy grail of measurement. That was what initially pulled a lot of money out of traditional advertising also. That's the promise that still goes out there. and say that as a advertising medium for a marketer or a brand, measurement is something that you get, which obviously has always existed from the days of TAM for advertising to BARC of television or RAM for radio and all other. There has always been study. There have been these exploratory methods of measurement of how much a media delivers for a brand. But the exactness of which the digital medium promised, right, was crazy. I mean,
No, but Udit, my point of view here is because and I think we would have a very contrary view over this because I have worked mostly in the digital domain and you have been in the traditional media format. What I understand is that there is obviously something which digital promised, and there is something which advertisers demand. Like it is much beyond the promise. So I can let you know that so many people viewed your ads.
so that's measurement. Yes.
Yeah. But now that if you and then you could also have some false views, which is a visibility everywhere.
Measurement,
Yeah.
with any measurement.
But if you ask me that now these views are what is the categorization of these views? How much does this view impact my eventual ROI? Like not even conversions, like ROI
Sure.
and lifetime value. That becomes too much for any measurement to kind of take into perspective, right?
See, precisely why. And again, the how I read it is, and again, it's not a new view. It's um, the promise itself became a limitation for digital at certain point of time because it promised this holy grail of exact measurement and higher degree of control of who you were delivering to, the knowledge of customer, and all of those points. The expectations of a marketeer were definitely ignited in that manner. कि अब मेरे को सब कुछ पता होगा. Now take me to that last
last
consumer
mile, yeah.
journey, last mile conversion advocacy, a funnel that conceptually any marketer puts down, right? That expectation was further fueled and fed on by most marketing and new mark tech, ad tech,
Right.
and all of those things, where there's a full focus on, there was in fact, a deeper focus on how do we measure better? How do we measure closely? And that specifically, I guess, was also under service to the medium itself, because then activations or ideas which weren't not as measurable on digital, they didn't flow as fast with the marketing people. The true strength, like everyone says with digital, was that at the first time it afforded to interact and engage with your audience at a scale.
Right.
Audience engagements were always existed, right? From postcards or to do surveys, and all of those things existed way beyond before we even kind of started even thinking of marketing. But at the speed and the scale at which social media platforms, Web 2.0 at that point of time, and that what that provided was kind of subdued by this entire piece of measuring each and every piece of digital activation. Because all the ideas, if as a marketer I got an idea which was more measurable than an intangible, more engaging ideas, I think so that measurability started winning because that's how the platform or the medium was pitched. Not to say that there weren't enough interesting ideas or award-winning stuff that brands managed to take out and do.
No, I think I completely aligned with your point. Having said that, there are a few things which are very interesting in this, right? One is the fact that digital has grown in a wave, right? Because the consumption of time,
Sure.
not just digital medium as spends. I'm not talking about spends. I think just about the consumption of the medium, right? The consumption of medium has become multifold in the last 10 years. Like, let's just talk the 10 years perspective because we are just talking from that lens.
Yes.
So the consumption of medium at that point, of the digital medium at that point, would have been like maybe in a 5 hours spent on different mediums, it would be around 1 hour. Let's just take very, very generous numbers.
But then
right?
you will find those numbers again.
Yeah. My point is that has become 4 times now. So now that 1 hour is limited to other traditional formats of communication.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So, and the challenge is, in fact, till date, the digital spends have not become 80% of the spends. The spends are still around 50-55%, right? So you're right saying that there is a challenge which is there in the promise of digital. It has become too scrutinized, too finite to kind of let it be a leap of faith. Like in television, there was a certain sense of leap of faith, right? In print, there was a certain sense of leap of faith. Same in radio, right? Which actually has gone away in digital, and rather than being a new medium where people are, it has become a medium where you are nitpicking on every measurement and kind of attributing everything to a final conversion.
I have a point of view on why that might be the case. And this was something that I personally have explored through triple M studies and limited projects. I have a theory of why that still is the case. And if I have to take a bet, I would still say that the traditional mediums still hold the sway of creating a brand uh, much more potently or much more strongly than digital. And then that, of course, this is a broad statement, and this there are always variations which goes on to whether it's relevant to D2C brand or an FFG brand and what scale of brand and what life stage. But I'll go out on a limb and say the traditional mediums, I mean by traditional, for the sake of clarity, we say television, outdoor, print, radio. These mediums still have a capability of building brands more strongly than digital. And what I think why is that is because all these mediums typically are a shared consumption media. And digital, while it comes with its benefit of that sharp targeting, is largely been, and especially in the last few years, with the advent of everyone getting their own phones and their own data connection, growingly individual consumption. So you gain on sharp shooting, sharp targeting, but you lose on collective consumption. And the whole idea of collective consumption, how it defines a brand, is very qualitative. Honestly, I'm not sure if someone would have gone down that rabbit hole and figured that how does that impact when you consume a hoarding collectively or even individually, is the perception that this is visible to me and many more people together. Similar thing happens when you look at an ad on a television and say, hey, this ad is being right now seen, an ad on the Kapil Sharma show, without any bar telling you, TAM telling you, you will know the entire country is nearly watching that show. And if you see in the ad, then without any number, you will know that the impact by on that ad break is being seen by the country. Similarly on print, even if I'm consuming a newspaper in my personal capacity, sitting on my pot in the morning, the essence of this news is something that be consumed by many others, and that is why it brings a certain stature to the brand immediately. I doubt any consumer will articulate it to this extent, but that is what drives stature for a brand.
I really like this point because I think this is about that trust, right? Like a brand creating trust. Eventually, a brand is about creating trust, right?
Absolutely. However, whatever you might say.
But I think that is the most important emotional quotient which a brand dominates, right? Now, when you say this, and I think it's a very interesting point. I think digital mediums have also tried this, but they have failed very, very in a very bad view. But when you say this, I think it's a very does it really need to, because of the fact that multiple people are watching it, and does it lead to more trust in a brand? Like if a lot of is there a reason for it? Like is there an underlying kind of a behavioral reason for this? Like
absolutely. If there is a person in a society who takes the stage and announces something, automatically there is more credibility because that person is putting themselves out there. It automatically, I think, what it talks to a very basic human nature. I guess that's what you were trying to go of. If there is a collective experience, if someone is putting themselves out there to a larger number of people, it is a big signal of trust. Yes, there are issues, and here now we talk about general consumer or human where trust is built one on one, but that's more through action. When it's through words, it has to be done in public.
okay.
if someone does a favor for me, one on one, a friend, a colleague, or anyone, his actions will drive that trust for me. If I have to extend it to a brand speak or the branding or marketing world, I would say when a product or service delivers what it promises to me, is it when I see it or observe it in action,